Hello and welcome to the M.B.Om podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.Om is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.Om, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about M.B.Om behind the scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created M.B.Om. M.B.Om helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where M.B.Om Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy M.B.Om and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBM Yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM Yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the M.B.Om podcast. I'm very excited that you are joining me for today's episode of the show. This episode is brought to you by OfferingTree, an all-in-one, easy-to-use online business platform that I've been working with for years. If you're looking to save time, energy, and money, check out OfferingTree. And don't forget to grab your special discount at OfferingTree.com/MBOM. I'll tell you a bit more about OfferingTree a little later on, but for now, let's dive into today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am thrilled to be joined by Jennifer Elise. Jennifer is a former studio owner who decided to shut down her physical location due to the pandemic. She pivoted and opened an online yoga and fitness collective called Amate Society. And you'll hear lots more about Amate Society throughout this episode because we're going to talk about what inspired Jennifer to first open her physical location yoga studio, then why she decided to close her physical doors, and then the decision to pivot and open a yoga collective, what that's been like, how it's been going, and everything she's learned throughout the process. So there's going to be lots of goodness in this episode. And I've been hearing a lot about different yoga teachers and maybe studio owners thinking about the idea of something like a yoga collective. So hopefully this will be a really fun and inspiring episode for you to listen to. So without further ado, here is Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast today, Jennifer. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Hi.
Awesome. And where are you joining me from today?
New Jersey.
Amazing. And so we're going to dive into all things studio ownership, this crazy pivot that I think has happened for most yoga teachers and tons of studio owners over the last year, over 2020. But before we get there, can you tell me a little bit about your yoga story and how you first got into yoga?
Love to. I started yoga sometime in high school. It was, my sister had this MTV yoga tape. I always tell this story, and there's usually 1 or 2 people, if I'm in a room full of teachers usually, who have also done this tape with the orange cover. It's a VHS, which is a throwback. So I did that tape like every day. It just was something. I was a synchronized swimmer, and it helped me with my flexibility. It helped me have something to do movement-wise. And I really loved moving with music. So I found the vinyasa with kind of electronic music really appealing. And then from there, I just kind of practiced on and off with no real awareness or intention of that being such a big part of my life. I traveled a lot after college. I went to Spain and Mexico and to Africa. And in all of those places, yoga went with me. A lot of the places I brought a yoga mat, which I'm not sure why it never struck me of how important it was if I was bringing a mat along to other countries. But after all of that, I came home from Africa after 2 years, and I wanted to learn more about the philosophy piece of yoga because it was always mentioned in classes, but never quite fleshed out. So I joined a teacher training like a lot of people do when they're curious about the philosophy. I was really intentional with talking to the leaders and making sure that we were going to dive into the philosophy. I had absolutely no intention of teaching. And my first experience in teacher training was really my first experience in studio yoga. I had always practiced from podcasts and videos and whatever I could find kind of online. And when I came into the studio, there was a different vibe of what was expected of you from the physical practice, how physical the practice was. And I had never encountered that before. I was worried that I wasn't going to really be able to reach that level or fit in. And over time, I did gain strength and more confidence in the physical practice. But I went through the teacher training and I finished May of 2012. And then around August of 2012, I had kind of a job upset, and I walked into a studio to take a class, and I got introduced to the owner and was able to actually get a job there teaching yoga and helping out at the front desk because I had lots of tech skills. I started working for a nonprofit, Ashrams for Autism, where we lead classes for people with autism. And I really worked heavily with them for a couple of years, again, on the tech side and really on moving them forward. I really enjoyed that. That ended around the time the pandemic began because all of the facilities were closed. So that's kind of a little overview of my yoga background.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious, what kind of spurred you deciding to step into owning your own studio?
I found that in studio culture, I wasn't fitting in well. This might be the same story a lot of owners take on. I found that my style of teaching, I was perhaps not getting the prime time slots at studios or finding really a community of teachers that I fit in with. I had moved away a lot from fast-paced vinyasa and was studying with Alexandria Crow at the time, and her work with hypermobility, slowing down the practice, breaking it down, and making it more accessible. I was huge into accessibility throughout my teaching, but I wasn't really sure how to do that. I had started kind of the process on my own, and then it was just accelerated by finding further teachers. And then also, I met my now wife in, I always get the year wrong, but I think 2016. And in 2017, she had always wanted to run a business and see how that goes. So we decided together to start the studio. She kind of works more behind the scenes, and I'm the yoga face of the business. So we do that together as partners in business and as partners in life as well.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I'm curious if you can dive into a little bit, like you mentioned, not really feeling like fitting in the studio culture. And I do feel like this is something I've heard from other studio owners. Like they're just they don't agree with the way the studio owner's running the place, or maybe they're not getting opportunities to teach, or they don't feel aligned with like the values and mission. I'm curious, like, what it was for you that was like about sort of the studios that you didn't feel like you fit in with, and then also kind of like how you were able to shift that with your own studio.
Great question. When I began teaching, I was in a lot of hot studios, which, again, as I said, I had never really practiced in a studio before my teacher training. And hot studios were a brand new animal. It was just, that was the huge boom of them around 2012 to 2015. I think that they were just really all that was opening, all that was out there. And honestly, I have trouble staying hydrated, and going to hot classes was really difficult. There was a lot of pressure to look a certain way, and I'm by no means, even at my size, where I don't think I'm that big. I found there seemed to be a lot of judgment, a lot of pressure to maybe take extra classes. I had a really horrible experience with one studio and left there. And I had a studio that I was working at that really I was running my own thing there. The studio owner was very hands off. We had a lot of contact with the students and building relationships, taking payments, all of the things you would do owning a studio. And around the time that we opened our studio, that studio closed, and they were close enough that a lot of my students followed me over. But I found with our studio, I was able to not worry about changing my teaching style, because I had been hired to do one thing, and then I had evolved in a certain way that wasn't aligning with the students at that studio, which I understand as the studio owner. When you're trying to please your customers and your teachers have changed up everything that they do, that can be a difficult thing to process as the studio owner. I liked, as the studio owner, to really foster new teachers. I found when I was starting, there was a lot of opportunity for new teachers, and that was kind of going the wayside as things went along, mainly because of all the teacher trainings, and especially in our area, it was very much like you take a teacher training and you get hired out of that by the studio, and you had to have a lot of experience to be hired outside of that teacher training. We didn't have a teacher training at our studio, so it was a great way to kind of foster new teachers. My students loved watching them evolve and grow the same way they had watched me from the very beginning. So I really enjoyed that aspect of running my own studio.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really amazing when you're just finding like you're having maybe disagreements with other studio owners, or it's just feeling like something's not fitting. Like, you love the yoga piece of it, but the studio aspect's not fitting. And there's actually one studio owner that I actually work with quite closely, and I've had her on the podcast before. That's how we originally met. And one of the things she said to me, this was like, I must have had her on like 4 years ago, like back in 2016. And she said, like, when you're just like working with studio owners that you just like don't like feel aligned with. So then you like leave to create your own business. And I was like, oh, I've never really had that experience. And we were kind of talking back and forth about the studio stuff. And for her, it came down to like, there's opportunities for studios. So I'm just going to create an environment that I want. And I think that that's a great way to kind of take your own career into your hands. So I think it's really cool that you were able to do that alongside your wife and create this business. I'd love to hear like how studio ownership was for you between the time that you started in, I think you said 2017, and up until, March of 2020, when the world kind of started spinning on its axis in a crazy way.
Yeah, so I found studio ownership very fulfilling. I ran into some of the same issues that most studios run into, as to where they're not as profitable as they could be because of just first of all, very high overhead. We lived in a very expensive area. And I mean, we had one of the cheapest rents. We had a great landlord who worked with us really well, but it's just an expensive area. And so the overhead with that and payroll was very high. I'm not an expert in in marketing, so marketing to students was definitely a learning curve there, and something I'm still learning and growing with. I found all of the learning process very interesting. I love to learn. Um, I love to absorb knowledge and then be able to teach other people. So I found again that studio owner role of not just being a teacher, but being in charge of other teachers or having contact with other teachers where I could have those conversations, help them understand the business better, help understand what they wanted from the business a little bit better. I had a really good relationship with all of my teachers and loved hearing feedback or loved helping them grow their careers in any way that they wanted to. So I sometimes wish I had a little bit more of the business experience, just as I think a lot of yoga teachers who don't come from a business background. I've always loved your podcast for that reason, because you have the business aspect. Um, but because a lot of yoga teachers don't come from a business background and they get into it for perhaps the reason that they want to kind of curate their own space, there is a lot of push pull between the tenets of yoga and what we might believe the tenets of business have to be or are. And I really enjoyed working with other like talking with other studio owners and things, and kind of being able to integrate those two things without creating that friction, so that there was more understanding of obviously like that energy exchange of giving a service for money or profit. um, so I found those things really interesting and fulfilling.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, I mean, it's so interesting, like, because I mostly work like with yoga teachers and studio owners on the business side of yoga, and just kind of these like, it's like misconceptions might be a good word for it. Like, it seems like a lot of people feel like they have to do business a certain way. And I'm really a believer, as you know, in like, creating heart-centered businesses where we can make, good decisions for our business and for ourselves. And we don't have to be, like greasy and slimy, and we don't have to be tricking people. We offer this really beautiful service that can be truly life-changing for people. And we just have to think about how our marketing and our sales and our copy and our website and all these things we do are just a matter of being able to let people know about these amazing services that we offer, and this amazing practice. So it's easier to say than it is to do, because there's so much out there trying to teach you to do marketing and sales in a way that does feel a little bit icky.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a learning process. And I think there are some great leaders in the yoga space that are trying to help yoga studio owners build these heart-centered businesses and really stay true to what their mission is. Our mission has always been to create space for people to fall in love with themselves. So that's always at the center of my mind, even with our teachers, our students, and with myself and my wife as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's get to March 2020. I feel like it's like, I don't know, the doom and gloom. It's happening upon us. What kind of were things like as, cases are ramping up and, rules are starting to come into place? I'm not too sure like what things were like in New Jersey. So can you just kind of walk me through what was kind of going on there and how that was impacting your studio?
Yeah, so New Jersey was hit really hard pretty early on. We were kind of a ripple effect of New York City. I lived in kind of, or I we worked in central New Jersey. So we made the decision to close before the mandates came in, which, for better or worse, I feel like having made the decision um, on our own felt just a little bit stronger in our convictions of how we could move forward, because we weren't scrambling that day that everything shut down, because it just came kind of out of nowhere here on, I don't know, it was like March 15th, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
we closed around March 11th, March 13th, somewhere around 1 year ago today. And I'm fairly tech savvy, and really was just like, how can we keep going for our students? And we decided that day that we were going to figure out how to go online. I did some research. We were online by the day after we closed. I think we might have had 1 day pause, but I'm not even sure about that. I worked with the teachers. We started having the teachers in studio broadcasting to students at home, and then as things actually shut down, we had to close down the whole studio and move things fully to teachers teaching at home. So from there was really nothing to do other than what we were doing, going online, continuing to meet our students. We were able to drop our prices a little bit just to help students who were struggling at the time. It was great because we had some students from far away come back in and take classes, at least at the beginning of things. As things wore on, it got a little bit more difficult for people to continue pretending we were going to go back to the studio anytime soon. I think at the beginning it was like, okay, this is a nice band-aid for 2 weeks, a month. And then as things progressed on, things got a little bit slower and a little bit harder. And as the owner, there were a couple of things I thought of, but one day I was driving home from the studio, and our biggest issue was still this rent. Our landlord, again, he worked with us, but he's got bills to pay too. So we decided, I don't remember, we decided probably in August or September that we were going to let go of the lease in November when our lease was up, and that we would get rid of that expense. And if things worked out in the future, we may or may not go back to a physical location. But I was early in the pandemic, April or May, I was driving home from the studio and literally just had this complete download of an idea of how I wanted to see the studio move forward if we couldn't go back to in person anytime soon. And so I just felt like, because the idea came to me all at once, it felt very new, but also very traditional. So we decided, instead of running on our membership model that we had, our unlimited, and everybody just came to as many classes as they wanted, I found that teachers were really just running the show, because they were doing everything as if they were the owner of their class. They were coming online and starting up the meetup, and they were checking in students. They were doing whatever relationship with the students. And I was very hands off during that time, except for in the back end with the students. So I found it wasn't really useful to keep going with the same, I pay the teacher per hour and like take the rest of the profits or whatever. Or as we let go of overhead, we didn't need so much cash influx to run the business. So I thought, and I had heard, I had heard of this model before, of a collective of teachers paying rent on a physical space. So it was something I was interested in when I was looking at creating our business, and it just didn't really fit with the physical space. But when we were looking at moving online, I thought, and I had watched a lot of other teachers, and I was like, what if we had a bigger group of teachers who wanted to work together to offer services, and I would do all the business things, because not every teacher wants to be collecting Venmo payments and announcing their schedule all the time and all of those kind of things, but they want to still have ownership over their own class. They can decide to cancel it. They decide what they charge for it. So I tried to marry the best of both worlds together, where teachers buy into the collective and I do most of the business work. Right now, we're still running on Mind Body, so that it's familiar to our students. And the students, on the student side, they buy into the collective with a one-time per year fee, or they can go monthly if they want to. And then they pay per class, and each teacher creates their own pricing. So they pay for whatever that price is through the system. So it kind of married those two things together and freed up teachers, especially the teachers who we still had in our studio. It freed them up in the same way a lot of other teachers were being freed up to kind of figure out what their own voice was, who their students were. So I don't really feel any ownership over the students anymore. And I got to really work with teachers, which is what I really, really enjoy, is mentoring teachers and helping them navigate the business. I am not necessarily an expert, but I do have a lot of experience. And I looked back on it and I was like, I guess people are now all big about imposter syndrome, but it kind of is that, like, who am I to help these people? But I do have a lot more knowledge than some people in this business, because I've been researching it for 5 years or so now. So that's kind of where we pivoted.
Yeah, I think that this is so cool to hear about. And before I touch on the business model and dive into some of the nitty gritty with that, I just want to say, like, I think we all experience some form of imposter syndrome with the work that we do. And I mean, of course, you have the experience to do this. You were running a successful studio for 3 years, and you were, into learning all of the stuff about running a business prior to that too. I think that it doesn't necessarily, like, we don't need a business degree or a MBA or something like that to be able to have successful businesses and run a business. And I'm sure there's lots of stuff that you have to offer your teachers from what you've been doing. Like, I think one thing that's the big difference between just teaching and running a studio is that you really do have to learn, like, the ins and outs of marketing and student relationships in a deeper way than if you're just teaching at a studio. And I think a lot of teachers have gone through that pivot over the last year, where now they're running their own Zoom classes and they're building their own email lists and they're using their own software and they're marketing their classes. And it's like, they're really diving into this world of entrepreneurship, which takes the business acumen to do. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about OfferingTree. I wanted to remind you about the special discount you can get with OfferingTree. I love telling yoga teachers about OfferingTree because not only is it your one-stop shop for all things that you need in your yoga business, but it is also easy to use, it's affordable, and it's truly an amazing company to work with. OfferingTree lets you sell courses, run classes, manage memberships, and so much more with just one account. That's right, just one login for all those parts of your business. One of the best parts about OfferingTree is their online store. You can sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're teaching yoga classes and looking to level up, selling digital content is the next step to growing your business. Over the last year, we've seen so much pivot and change happen in the yoga industry, and having your own unique yoga business where you offer your students different course material can be so beneficial in creating a sustainable business with diversified income. And while there's many different platforms that you can create courses on these days, OfferingTree's course tools are easy to use and they're really affordable. And if you have a website you already like, you can still use OfferingTree. But there's one other thing I want to tell you about OfferingTree that makes all the difference in the world to me and probably to you too. They're a company that truly cares about yoga teachers and the wellness industry overall. I chose to partner with OfferingTree because I love the product and I love the people. Whenever yoga teachers have a suggestion for something that they need out of the platform, they can reach out directly to the people at OfferingTree and they're actually heard. So much of the development that OfferingTree has gone through over the last year has been because of yoga teachers like yourself. So if you're looking to save time, energy, and money in your yoga business, OfferingTree is hands down the software for you. Go to offeringtree.com/M.B.Om to learn more and get your discount. Okay, let's get back to the episode. I have a couple different questions about the collective. So I'm curious, first of all, when you presented it to the teachers, like what was kind of the response? Like were teachers excited about this idea?
We had a mixed response, definitely. And I will say when I present to new teachers, because we do have new outside teachers who are interested in learning about what we do, I will say when I present, and even I just remind our teachers over and over, this opportunity and the way we're running now isn't for everyone. It does take a specific attitude and desire from the teacher's perspective. And when I did present it to them, I knew that there would be some teachers who may not continue with us over time. All of them decided to give it a try, which I really, really was happy with because they were able to at least see where they could go with this and if it was the right fit. But we do let teachers know it's not the right fit for every teacher. But if they want this, if they want to be a part of it and they want to grow within it, then we are 100% behind them and we want it for them as well. So I do give as much support as I possibly can as one person to help them grow their marketing efforts on social media, to help them build their relationships with students and to help them grow their classes within the collective. So our teachers, there was definitely a mixed response as to how excited they were, but they all saw that we were trying our best to keep them supported, even if we couldn't do it in the same way that we were before. And then we had asked a couple of teachers who I kind of knew, but who were maybe too far to work at our physical location, and was able to open up the floor for them to have a platform for their students and for our students. So it's been a really interesting journey, inviting in new teachers, and again, not all teachers will stay with us. They choose right now, they choose month to month to subscribe to the collective. So it's really flexible for them if they need to take time off, if they don't want to participate anymore. And in the future, when we reach some of our bigger goals of things to offer for teachers, I think one of our biggest goals is to offer teachers some sort of affordable continuing education, which, as all teachers and owners know, we spend a lot of money on continuing education. And I really do see the power of the collective dollar. I mean, we've seen it in lots of places. So I think that we can eventually be able to provide that to teachers. And as we grow and evolve, we're hoping to perhaps any teachers who want to pause but stay active within the collective, there will also be options for that.
Okay, that's cool. So I'm curious, say I'm a teacher that's interested in being a part of the collective. How does it work to get started?
So right now, we've just been putting out calls for any teachers who want to learn more about how we work. And so we've done that through our Instagram and our Facebook and just collected emails. Then we usually have a meeting, an informational meeting, so that they can really understand the ins and outs of how the collective works, what their obligations will be, and what our offerings are. So what we do to support them, and how they're participating in that. And then if they decide to move on after that presentation, I meet with them one-to-one just to kind of learn their teaching style and what they want out of this, what they're bringing into it, where they're at with their careers as teachers. There's no obligation for a teacher to come in with any sort of level of following, but we do find that teachers who have a somewhat established student base do very well in this, because their students are able to buy into the collective, take their classes for really great prices, and then also get access to a bunch of other teachers in case they have other times they want to be taking classes, or they're interested in some other type of yoga that their teacher doesn't teach. So it does offer a lot for students. We tell new students, or we tell teachers to talk to their students. I guess the analogy is our collective is a lot like Costco. Like, they pay their one-time membership fee, and they still have to, sometimes they don't understand why am I still paying for class prices, but you don't go to Costco paying your membership fee and then expect to get groceries for free. It's just giving you that discount. So we do have a drop-in for people who want to try out the classes with absolutely no obligation. But being a member drops your prices up to 50%. So there is a benefit of being a member and following your teacher in there. So yeah, we just go from that one informational group meeting where you can ask questions if you have them, or just listen. And then we move to a one-to-one. And then if both parties decide it's a great fit for you, then we move forward in getting you onboarded with, it's a simple form, and you fill it out with what you'd like your schedule to look like, and all of the, like, your Instagram handle and all of that fun stuff. So it's I guess it's an easy process. It could take a little bit of time, but
yeah. No, it's really interesting. I've never really been a part of a collective, and I've interviewed somebody who was doing like a yoga co-op in a physical space. So kind of like more splitting the rent. And I think kind of the idea of you get to choose your schedule a bit more and bring your own students in, but it gives the opportunity of cross marketing, because people understand that there's all these teachers that are a part of this one space. And I'm curious, now that you've been doing this for, I guess, almost a year, or let's say 6 to 9 months, how has it been going? Do you feel like this is something that feels sustainable in the long term? Has the idea come to fruition in the way that you'd hoped?
I definitely still see the opportunity for it to grow. I think the hesitation on some people's part would be what's going to happen once the closures and everybody's able to kind of go back to quote unquote normal life, whatever that's going to be. So I think that's kind of been the looming thought for everyone. But I feel like all of the teachers who have bought in, and myself included, I have told them I'm really committed to this, not just as a pandemic fix. I think that there is space for live stream studios once this has finished, because there will still be people who loved the idea of getting up 5 minutes before class, rolling onto their mat, doing their practice, and then getting to work. A lot of people may still continue to work from home. I know that there's a lot of talk about how offices are going to kind of work with this new normal once we get there too. So I think there's still going to be a market for it, especially I really feel like we try to differentiate ourselves from other online on-demand platforms, which are really great for those people who need like really big time flexibility and maybe a little bit of a more even more affordable option. But I think that being able to build a relationship with your teacher, I take online classes with my teacher who, like, the pandemic has been a blessing because I would have never been able to take physical class or asana classes with her before. She's all the way across the country. So I think that over time we'll see this as a sustainable option. Those people who want to stay environmentally friendly and not be driving to a studio really far away. And for those people who are in studio deserts where they can't reach studios, we've also found a really good connection with yoga teachers as students within the collective. We have quite a few teachers who are very experienced. They've had lots of years of teaching. And so we have some different styles that might flourish in a studio. So with that, we found, and I think also with our class times being somewhat, we have a lot of different class times. So that helps teachers who teach at certain times find classes, live classes to take with teachers who care about them. So I think with all of that, we have seen a steady but slow growth. We were small as a studio to begin with. We're definitely looking to expand our teacher list so that we are able to provide even more times and types of services, because we find our students are really, really gravitating towards the fact that we've got some different things on the schedule than we were able to provide as a studio in person.
Yeah, for sure. It's so cool to hear this. And I definitely feel like the yoga world going online is going to be a silver lining that comes out of this whole like crazy pandemic. I've said this a million times on the show, and I really do feel that way. I think that having the opportunity to, train with a teacher that you formerly only could have traveled and maybe traveled a long distance, which might not be accessible for some people in terms of, affordability and just taking that time away from families or work and that type of thing. And then also, like you said, there's a lot of people who live in studio deserts where there's just no studios close to them. And now these people have access to yoga. And that's, I think, a really, really amazing way to get more people practicing yoga. So I'm definitely excited to see how this model works, because I think that having a little bit of extra support for teachers and a little bit of a framework and structure for them, while also giving them kind of this independence to, work with the students and kind of build their own small business is a really cool one. I've loved this conversation. I have a few more things I want to pick your brain about, but we'll do it behind the scenes. So let's wrap up here. Jennifer, can you share where people can go to find out more about you, where they can learn about the collective and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so we are everywhere as Amate Society, AMATE Society. So that's amatesociety.com. We're on Instagram as Amate Society, and we're also on Facebook. Yeah, I think that's where you can find us.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Jennifer Elise from Amate Society. Make sure you go and check them out. And if you want to continue this conversation with Jennifer and myself, we talked a lot about the business lessons that she's learned throughout her entire yoga career. So as a teacher, as a studio owner, now as, the founder of a yoga collective over on M.B.Om behind the scenes. So you can check that out at patreon.com/M.B.Om yoga. And of course, a huge thank you to our sponsor, OfferingTree. To start spending more time with students and less time with software, head on over to offeringtree.com/M.B.Om to get an exclusive discount. All right, friends, that's all from me today. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the show, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.